I don't know if anyone here listens to our podcast. It's a trip. We like it. Usually, whoa, that's not going to work. It is mostly Friday mornings where we open the Riverside app and we say, what do we talk about today? Trisha's like, you're going to have to decipher it. I'm like, did you see Ashley's notebook? I'm used to it. Okay. Effective velo. Having back speed pitches slow down. Backspin.
Kind of chase some of these off-speed backspin pitches.
Yep.
How have you guys seen that kind of evolve and change in your, world?
Yeah. Krista always makes a joke that basically every time she looks over the pitching floor, basically Josh is over there teaching somebody the backspin off speed pitch because it's interesting. We discovered it 3 years ago and now we understand its effectiveness. And so it's like when it looks like they don't have it or it looks like someone can have it, we're like, well, obviously, that's probably the first thing that we do is to say, let's identify all the off speeds that we don't feel like they have on the table. Based on the data I'm going to show you tomorrow, and a lot of that, I'm seeing along with you, which I think is really fun. Right? It's not let me tell you as the expert of let's literally look at the data as it stands right now. It's still highly, highly effective. But like anything else, it's going to keep moving because as then more and more people, we're over here teaching everybody to throw it and everyone's throwing it and now all of a sudden it's more common. Does that impact it? Maybe not just because it's just so difficult, but maybe it's why in-game data is just ever evolving. Got to keep watching it. But what I think is interesting about tomorrow's talk, so hold on, and we can revisit, is that it's not just as simple as velo. So what we saw in my talk last year at Pitchstock, it was actually pitches that are less than 58 miles per hour are first of all, if they're 68 plus with backspin, that's most effective. And then the next was 58 below. And the in the middle is just not. It's just so average. And we were kind of getting a feel for that, right? I think maybe 2-3 years ago, Trisha, you and I were these pitches are terrible. Why, And I think that's interesting. At the youth level, everyone just wants more. And so I think having the data where we're able to show pitchers is look at this chart. If you start going in this category, it's a worse pitch. But tomorrow's talk is going to start playing into the okay, but what if it's this speed and this break profile, this break profile, but also at this spin rate? What about at this release height? How does that influence it? So there's other layers there that are maybe keeping things effective. So I was kind of mentioning this to you last night. So this is what we're gonna do tomorrow. I think it sounds great. So hopefully you do too. But what we were literally doing, Josh, Renee, and I on the floor last night, the pitching floor, was having a pitcher throw a pitch. And we were literally okay, it's this break profile, it's this spin rate, it's this. And literally, let's find that. Boom, we're that pitch is terrible. Who told you to throw that? We did. 3 weeks ago, we're scratch, go to the next one, let's literally find the parameters. And we're wow, it turns out, just because it breaks X amount of inches, that's actually not what we're going for. So I think the answer is that right now the data is showing it's still highly effective. And then I think there's probably going to be a time where it's not as. And then in addition to that, I still think we're going to have workarounds with some of these other variables. So cool, because that means we're not just stuck in, remember 5 years ago when we were doing X, we got more to keep chipping away at.
I was gonna say, not to bridge it a little bit to what she's saying about hitting, but we had to change a little bit. What we've seen on the hitting side is that 3 years ago, no one used machines. Softball didn't use machines. And so no one could hit velo. And so one of the biggest things we did was incorporate machines. We use smash balls so we can get it pretty fast and they don't cry because their hands hurt the whole time. And then what happened is we were our kids are really good at hitting velo, but no one can hit off speed. And now our pitching floors over there are teaching everyone 42 off speeds. And so that's not great. And so what we had to start incorporating this summer was slow. And so our hitters had to start, literally, most of our hitters are doing days where they hit 40 off the machine that has arc, and they hate it, and they're bad at it. And that's not even variability, so that's not great. And so we've had to balance this world of you're always going to be pitching and hitting, you're always going to be chasing each other. And so it's as you catch up, then it fixes. And I always go to MLB because you're talking about the highest level of data, and that it's everyone threw a 2-seam. Then they realized that if they threw 4-seam, which 4-seam in baseball is a straight rise ball, it's straight backspin. So if you throw a 4-seam fastball, top of the zone, 96, no one can hit it. Then everyone starts their hitters at the MLB level to hit that pitch. And now all of a sudden the game is switching much more to off speed. And that game and back and forth is just going to continue. So I think it's a fun time to be in. And then you can just start to pinpoint and ask these questions. I don't think people should be scared of asking questions. How the initial, and I think this is in the presentation, so I'm not going to give it away, but how some of the initial conversation happened was Ashley and I's back and forth. And I know Josh has had some this summer too of like, we're in the travel ball world. We were in the travel ball world. Ashley would be working with my pitcher. She would say, she has this pitch, it's elite. And I would say, that's great. But every time we throw it, it gets hit over the fence. So that can't be right. Yeah.
I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah. And literally that example of the pitcher that started sparking some of that, the pitch that we're referencing falls into a profile that only gets 5% swing and miss at the college level. So we just
called that shit 3 years ago.
But we had to just, but you wouldn't know that because it seems like an above average pitch just based on the break. And so there's this level of nuance. And I think it's just, you have to be willing with pitchers and with everyone to be like, we weren't wrong. We were wrong, but we didn't know why we were wrong or what we were chasing. The data can keep getting more finite and keep chasing it. And I also think sometimes you have to be, when Ashley was start for tomorrow, I'm like, they don't have to be conclusions. Nothing has to be conclusions. I think we get into the mistake of making conclusions too much. And so, we talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago. Someone texted me like, would you ever release height? And I just said, we don't know that yet. Like, we have no idea yet. We can start to see how release height is impacting swing and miss rate. So we might say, that's cool, and that might help. We're recruiting and we're going after, but we haven't then gone into training and tried to manipulate that. That could be really bad for that pitcher. Like, that could make her lose break. That could be a bunch of things. So it just has to be kind of like, okay, we see something. Could we attack it very educated? Maybe, maybe not. And we go and we go and we go. And sometimes we have I think our game is too fast you want to move fast. So you have 2 data points and you're like, yeah, let's do that. It's conclusion. And I think that can be really dangerous. So the way you get athlete buy-in is to say, we're just going to watch it. Okay, we hear you. There's something weird here. And let's just keep moving. I think that's important. All right. How to get players to feel what they're doing. Wow, that's a broad one. Who wants to answer that? How do you get players to feel what they're doing? On what? Pitching?
I just think still
Yeah.
I have no idea what and I want to punch them in the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. You have no ownership of your process. And
Right.
I'm pretty sure I'm not the one throwing the ball. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so
The neck.
Yes, literally. With some different levels too. So what do you feel like we could do a better job of?
I'll take one stab because we just had this conversation with a college coach, and this is related to hitting, but I think it goes in the pitching too, is that we had a college coach. So there's a hitter that came and trained with us this summer, and the feedback that the hitter gave us from her exit, and I also talked to her coach, was she can't feel anything she's doing. She can't describe what's happening in her swing. And so the conclusion was she's not coachable. That's really tough for me because we're making a lot of conclusions there to the end of not coachable. But what I will say is that athlete didn't have good feel. She was kind of, we call it rigid. She didn't have good feel of what she was doing. But what was happening is they were like, so go sit on the tee. That's opposite. If an athlete doesn't have good feel, they cannot go down to the tee and work through something at that pace and make any adjustments. It is literally the opposite. What that athlete needs is the highest level of external feedback that you could possibly give. So different bat, how we would do it in hitting is different bats. For the whole summer, she never trained on anything lower than machine. She needs different bats. She needs different balls. She needs different angles. She needs just constant feedback. Every single time she's not making an adjustment, something bad needs to happen. She needs to get feel. She needs the highest level of feedback to feel it. And so I think it's the opposite. It's like when you have a kid who looks rigid and can't make adjustments and we're like, go do flips, we break them all the way down. And it's a lot of times the flip of that. They need the most external feedback possible. And then you have to just say okay, when you felt that result, what are you trying to accomplish? And you just keep going back and forth with that athlete. And so from my standpoint, I think sometimes when they can't feel it, we get it backwards. We think we need to like slow it way down. But that then assumes that they have the internal feedback to make that adjustment, which is the opposite of what's happening for the athlete. So that's what I would say on the hitting side, is we add as many external feedbacks as we can.
I was thinking, it's Pitchstock, Krista. Remember when Boo at one point was like, would you do hit stock? I'm like, well, maybe we're on our way. I also think I agree with that. This is where I'm like, you have to throw a weighted ball and a plyo, and you have to do all the things for all. However, I also think they just get capped. So we have a college athlete now. She throws hard, and she's a low feel. And at this point, the goals are like, throw as hard as you can and be able to put it where you want. And let's just get you a good change up. So I do think the performance goals go down, because what happens is you can improve their feel a little bit, but the translation process then to sustain. I mean, you know how difficult it is for sometimes really good athletes are low feel. And that is the like, I want to karate chop somebody in the neck feeling, right? Because you're like, you're what we're looking for. So I do think, I mean, if we think about the amount of work that we do in a season with an athlete who has like a standard level of feel or a high level of feel, how hard it is to keep them with like fatigue in the season and just like keeping them afloat. I sometimes think that if the goals get too big, they're just going to go away right away. So I think you have to just like, what's the minimum amount that would be okay for this athlete, knowing that maybe I could get her to this point, but it's probably going to fall pretty fast.
What makes a pitcher low feel?
Oh, yeah.
Me cracking that. I'm going to talk about the most chaotic thing that a pitcher will go through, which is puberty. On a much larger scale. I think her parent actually is listening virtually. I just had this conversation with an athlete who is going through it in the middle of her growth change right now, is post-puberty, about 6 months. And just based on her trajectory, you know, she right now is 5'9" and could maybe be 6'4" like her dad. We don't know. She literally needs to cook longer in that regard. And so, but there was a point, you know, within the last few months where she stopped pitching. She was like, I'm so frustrated. I can't move quickly. I can't coordinate myself. I don't know how to get past this. Her parent feels stuck. He feels helpless. And so my conversation with them was, first of all, let's come in and get an assessment. Let's just see what we're dealing with here from a baseline standpoint. And then my conversation after that was basically, your body needs to know that movement's safe for you, that it's fun for you, right? And pitching right now isn't very fun for your body. It doesn't know what to do. It feels like it's just absolutely, I love the internal, external, like internal chaos. You need external feedback. And so I always talk about, I'll give James an opportunity here, that strength and conditioning is the body's way of understanding movement that is loaded. It may be slower, it may not be slower, but it is the opportunity for the body to figure out, okay, I can do this. I have feel. It needs external feedback. And I think, you know, anytime you've got a growth change like puberty, and then I always extend it to, I sort of call it puberty 2.0, you're freshmen with low training ages that have never seen a weight room before or have no concept. All they've ever done in their lives is speed and agility, right? It's all limb-based stuff. They have no concept where the middle of their body is. They need, as Krista said, the most amount of external feedback they can get. And so that is the continuum of just, one, baseline everyday life. Do you enjoy moving? So what her and I talked about was, you know, you enjoy dance. Go do that. I'm not saying go and like full bore be a dancer, but your body needs to figure out how to coordinate itself without the pressure of pitching and without feeling like there's some end goal in mind. And so that conversation, I think, was very impactful for her. But on her trajectory of then she needs to be in a strength and conditioning program that gives her the opportunity to do that more frequently, to do that with load, to work on things moving quicker while she's in this change. And I think that extends to when your freshmen come on campus, especially when you change strength coaches and the adaptations in the strength room change, right? I mean, I'm gonna guess some programs, you get a new strength coach every year, right? And their approach to those adaptations can really introduce some chaos to your athletes. Even if you have the same strength coach, but the intent of the program changes between off season to in season, just can introduce chaos. And so anytime that internal chaos is present in whatever way it might be, I often, again, I'm talking about puberty, you have to have the external feedback. And so the extension of strength and conditioning to plyos, to bat weight variability, to, not going back to a static ball, but getting them to continue to solve problems with success. It's the success part that is so, so critical for them. I'll give it to you for any additional.
Yeah, there's coordination and capacity. So can they organize a certain way? And then what can they do when, load-wise in that? So the pitching motion is extremely coordination based, and then you need the capacity to produce the force on the ball to make that ball go hard and go where you want it to go and do the things you want it to do. So then we're going to train in the weight room across all 3 planes. Another piece I'm going to get into in my talk after lunch. You need to build that. It's just baseline athleticism. Can they do with their body what they want to do? You need to build the coordination and you need to build the capacity to do so.
I was going to say, I just had a talk with a college coach, and she was like, oh, we have this kid. We're so excited. She's an incoming freshman. She goes really hard. And her changeup, it can be good, but it's really inconsistent. But I'm really excited to get my hands on her. And I thought, oh, no. And what I would say is, what you need to start learning is, the cues for it. That's kind of what I was asking. So I think there's the youth baseline of, our youth system sends a lot of rigid athletes your way. And there's a lot of conversation about how we fix that, because we send a lot of kids who have done one thing, who hit puberty in a way. We know every single youth pitcher has a stiff arm because they're not stable. They do that 452,000 times. And then they come to you and they're like,
Trillion.
And then they come to you and they're like, I can't feel anything, because they can't. And I think, so there's a question of some pressure on the youth system of how do we stop doing that? Because we're sending kids who are super rigid. It's, they're more likely for injury with that way. Their development. There's a whole bunch of things that happen as a result of that. And then there's the question for the college coaches of what are the signs of a kid like that? And the signs of a kid like that is one day you go and the changeup is great. And one day you go and the changeup is over the backstop and on the ground. It's when you lack timing to that degree. That's why when the coach said that, I was like, maybe she'll get the changeup. But I was like, it's that level of rigidity and timing. So I think it's starting to cue on what is going to happen. We all think that kid has a lot of potential, but maybe. But also she might be stuck like that. And it's actually really hard to have at college to take away rigidity. So we've been talking about that's trying to define that is hard, but it's stiff arm usually in pitching, and hitting. It's insane bat path. There's some relations between why they get stuck in that.
Rigidity is fast.
Yeah.
All it is.
You started saying something. Okay. All right. Can you explain the different seasons with timeframes? When is ramp up, off season, in season?
Pitching, not strength and conditioning, right?
I think that's.
Okay. Let me read one more time. Can you explain the different seasons with time frames? When is ramp up, off season? Okay. I guess it doesn't really matter if it's college or high school because it mirrors itself. This time is like a mini everything. So it goes August, September, October, goes off season, preseason, in season. That's kind of where it goes. But then there's individuality to that. Think about even the things we talked about this morning. You might feel like it's in your best interest to speed someone up, to slow them down. Maybe they're on a trajectory, kind of what Chelsea was talking about, where yes, ideally we'd like to be here, but we're not. But I usually try to think about that in that time frame. Like our high school level athletes, they just finished nationals and we're like, okay, now is the time that you want to get an assessment. You could take these 2 weeks off and then you treat the next 4 weeks as an off season. And then here's your preseason concept. It's like this little mini, and which I think is what happens at the college level as well. Unless some coaches feel differently about it. Like, I don't know, in my experience in working from a consulting standpoint, some coaches are like, they treat the fall as like, there's so much live and there's so much scrimmaging. I'm probably not a huge fan of that, but I'm not in charge. I always say that's that person's the boss. So what they decide, and sometimes it's the pitching coach who's making that decision, and sometimes it's the head coach. And so I think that's important. I usually go into consulting in the year of like, what are we working with? What are the parameters? Because we can't say, we're going to take it slow and let's focus on patterns in this. And meanwhile, the head coach is like, I want to see scrimmaging 2 times a week in this. I mean, those are the parameters we're working with, and that's the boss, and that's what we're going to do. So I think if we're talking ideal, you would want to probably do a little bit of all of it. And I think because it gives you an opportunity to see all the weaknesses. Like maybe it's like, okay, in training, this athlete looks great, but then like, man, command in game is really, so now all of a sudden we have a deeper level if we go through everything, a deeper level in the off season. And the off season really is about the athletes being really educated on those very specific things we saw. You know, I'm a big fan of like, don't let the athletes go rogue in the winter. They were like, I went home and worked on X. It's like, do not do that. You know, like just focus on why. Here's what it would look like to make sure that's good. And also we build volume over like, I feel like there was a question of, there was a question over here, which I thought was a great question for Chelsea, which was like, do they like gas out? So maybe you asked it or something of like, you take them out early, but what if you really need them to push through? And I was thinking that's really where you're going to rely on their like winter training, their strength and conditioning, certainly. And then also like we push volume then, because then when they get back, we go high intensity. Like our intensity is high. We are scrimmaging. We are pushing them. We are challenging a lot of their like execution, and volume comes down a little bit, so that they look like they seem like a little bit fresher. The tank, they don't want to come in like kind of worn down. So that's how we go. And then the season is like, you know, as everyone knows, like war paint, you know, like week by week, survival of the fittest kind of mindset. But that's how it rolls. You know, we're big proponents of the summer of the athletes. Like, you know, the way we usually advise pitchers to tackle training is to understand training is about, it's not just about number of days a week. It's about volume. It's about intensity. There's so many things. And so I think like athletes will go home for the summer and sometimes just like take off. And the things that we advise them to do is to understand, like, you probably only need like maybe 2 weeks of not throwing. And then you need 2 weeks of ramp up. Before you know it, that's 4 weeks you haven't like been competitive on the rubber. Like that's plenty of time. So I definitely think that sometimes athletes in that time frame, they don't always consider like time off, how much ramp up would that involve? What does that leave me for actual performance goals? And you don't really need that much time off. It's usually just a little mental, emotional reset. And the like 2 weeks off, 2 weeks ramp up is usually appropriate. So we kind of guide them through that. But that's the pitching side. That's it?
Matches, right?
Okay.
I was gonna say for high school this summer, so that's the tricky part. Is like our high school athletes have an in-season that lasts from March to July, which is unfortunate. That's the reality. I mean, and so the conversations we get all the time are, my athlete was throwing 63 in high school, like she got clocked at 63 in high school, and now she's only throwing 58, so something's wrong. It's like, no, nothing's wrong. She's tired. I mean, it's just, and unfortunately,
Kind of crazy.
yeah, and unfortunately, she's tired at a time you don't want her to be tired. And then the college coach you care about is clocking her, and everyone's freaking out. It's like, I mean, it's just a reality. She's 15 years old. She cannot have a 7-month in-season time period and sustain this. That is crazy town. So I think it's just that, yeah, I mean, no one, they're like, I don't know what happened. And I literally, because I quoted this to them, I had a call with a parent and they were saying that. I was like, did she throw a lot in high school? And they were like, yeah, like 8,000 pitches. I'm like, okay, well, I think I know why she's not hitting. I mean, and it wasn't, they really meant it. They just didn't, they were like, yeah, and we don't understand why she's not throwing the same velos. I'm like, well, we're going to nail this assessment. I'm like, come on over. I was like, that's why you see kids spike in velos. We're like, just take a rest. We had kids come back from college programs where they hadn't talked about workload and they had taken just a week off and they came to assessments and PR'd. And they were like, my velo was down during season and that my patterns must have been going. It's like you were tired. You literally took a week off and came to your assessment and PR'd. So workload is definitely not like fully understood. And I think that's the tricky part is when you're talking about how to attack things for high schoolers, sometimes junior high is worse. We have junior high kids on top competitive teams at 7th and 8th, and they start travel tournaments in February. And so now it's like, I have a 12-year-old and they're like, well, it's in season and it's February. And then what's worse about those kids is that then, we have our high level juniors, seniors, who are like, okay, they finished nationals, which actually is a little bit earlier now, thankfully. I think it's cutting off the summer a little bit. And then they're like, now I have till October 15th. But you have a 12 or 13-year-old, and they're like, we start Labor Day weekend. And so they just finished their nationals now. And then they have now 3 weeks, and they're even younger. And so then you're like, this kid can't feel anything. I'm like, well, I know why. Because from 10 to 14, she pitched 4,000 and 82,000 pitches. And she got really stuck in that, and she's tired, and her body dealt with that. And so she gets capped from that. And that's kind of getting at the velo question earlier is like, we said you can't go after velo, but the large majority of our 12 through 18 athletes have trend lines of velo that are up for every year they worked with us. They start at, whatever, and usually we can get most athletes to 60, I would say. It's like that. And then sometimes it's capped in, but they do have up. And that's just because it's time. They're building power underneath, and they're having year after year, they're having workload, they're having all these things. So you can build that under it, but you have to combat the panic all the time.
I'm going to add to this.
Yeah.
I think there's a real power, and I think part of my talk tomorrow is about connecting the youth and the collegiate level, because the youth level just worships the collegiate level. So I'm thinking about our work together over the year, and I was like, there were pitchers on staff that were like, for the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, they never threw over 85%. Right? We're like, she really needs to give her 85, maybe 86, Zach, not 87%, just because we were just so, like on top of not letting that pitcher like hold the tank, as long as possible. And I think, okay, the more that I'm having those experiences with programs that are, competing for national championships, I just use those as case studies, because the high school levels are like, I can't do that. I'm like, you can do that, actually, because some of the best pitchers in the country, let me give you an example. And they're like, okay, that gives them permission. And I do think that's like a good example. Like, I will often draw without the specifics of the athlete or, the specific school, but like, here's an example of the pitcher at this level doing this, and here's how we attack that for this. And she did that. So you know how you're watching her on TV and she was still doing this? Like, this is what was going on in that. It's okay. So I do think more of that conversation and this like openness on how we are navigating workload at the collegiate level, which is becoming more and more of and workload management at the collegiate level does not mean like Allie still threw 200 innings. I'm not saying like too much over there. It's like, no, you got to win. Get out there, Allie. But it's the workload in between the games and what that looks like in between. That needs to be differentiated. But the high school level athletes give themselves permission, and their parents give them permission to start to think about workload differently when it's known at the collegiate level that that's also happening. So if you're at the collegiate level and it's not happening, do it. And if you're already doing it, you should talk about it, because it would really help the generation underneath.
Can you to more specifics on what you recommend private sector coaches should focus on? What would you prioritize?
Okay. Like at the youth level, I was saying, like a pitching instructor. I just think we are I think command is so interesting, because at the collegiate level, command is everything, because the zone is like the size of a pea. And so command is so important. But we like over prioritize it, I think, too early. And so then we just have really rigid arm action. And so I think that what I would probably tell private sector coaches to really prioritize is more like variability in movement, more variability, and just like literally the movement and like in their patterns and their arm action. Stop getting away from like, you're going to hit this 10 times. First of all, we never hit anything 10 times in a row. Like, that's not pitching. We talk about this all the time in like pregame warm-ups. Like, stop throwing 7 of a pitch in a row, because you will never throw that. Like, start matching what the game is, which is constant variability. So I think the more we can prioritize that, but you have to know that the ability to have constant variability will come with like total chaos. So I think at the youth level, we often prioritize, like when the result is good, we're like, good. And this is a little bit of talk tomorrow, like the gap. In my mind, the gap between the youth level and the college level has never been larger, just because we now have in-game data, and college coaches are now educated on what things need to be, and we're still running at the circus level underneath of it, and just guessing. So that's tomorrow also. Maybe it should have been today. Too late. So I think that that's what I would probably do, is to start, first of all, like educating yourself on what's needed at that level. And this like rigidity, put balls in spots. Stop using phrases like hit your spot, because they'll do anything to hit their spot. And that alone, then they think they're being successful, and that alone is not going to do it. So I think that's the case. Although I'm not advocating that command is not important, but it's the later phase. It's by the time they get to the collegiate level. So more arm variability, more adjustability, that's important. And at the expense, just teach them a good off speed. Literally at the youth level, teach them a good off speed, have somewhat command, and be able to so they're not stuck in the ways that they do things, and then just ship them off. That's basically, and then they're a great, clean slate, and that's it.
We also, Josh and Ashley developed an 8-week youth program that we did last year, I think 2 years ago. And we referenced it in the podcast 3 weeks ago, which I found out literally my email, like 16 times a week, we get an email of like, where's the program you're referencing? Where's this? So we are going to put that on the website. So for people asking to, we're going to put on the website for free our youth, what we did during that. I think it's really important. The youth topic for the roundtables this afternoon, we're going to do one that's on youth pitching, which Josh and Jamie are going to sit at. And Jamie runs Alliance, so it's good. That was something we talked about last year, was getting some of the youth organizations in the room. But I think 3 weeks ago on the podcast, we talked about it. The youth stuff it's complicated. It's complicated because softball pitching is not like baseball pitching. Not everyone does it. So if we put pitch counts into our game tomorrow, the whole youth market implode because there's not enough pitchers. And so there is this world of how do we start changing it so that we have more people who can throw underhand. That's really what we need to do. But then at the youth level, at 10U, 8U, you have dads who have never played, you have moms who weren't pitchers, and so no one knows how to do that or how to start teaching people to throw underhand. And so by the time you get to 18U, it's like, yeah, I hear you that I shouldn't like abuse my pitchers, but there's 2 of them. So what am I supposed to do in this market? So I think it's just, there's a whole world of how we start to build from that standpoint and bridge the gap, which is complicated. It's complicated, and people like Jamie and the other governing bodies, we just have to all keep talking together about what our goals are for it to make sure we have more pitchers. Okay, I have this one. Hold on. I have one from the virtual crowd. Can you elaborate more on patterning versus hand position in pitchers with arm side run?
Okay. Questions? Yes. Okay, so it's not always the same, but usually, majority of the time, someone with arm side run, thanks, finish with that, thank you, is there's a compromised arm length concept. So there's something overhead where their arm is really compromised in length. And so the way they slice the ball, it cuts like this way. So normally we're working like behind the ball, and even when we're inside the ball, we still turn it this way, but they slice it in a way, typically. I've seen it a few different ways, but that's usually the result of it. And so, yeah, so that one can be a little bit, we often are like, we need more arm length because we need more stretch, and that's gonna give us more velo, and maybe it's a command thing. And so you're kind of playing back and forth with that. Also, sometimes it is like sometimes it can be a posture thing, meaning like, okay, when her posture is down here, that's putting her arm, but it's usually at least a combination of both. I don't think I've ever seen that it's just posture, but the arm has full length, because then there's enough length to like rotate. So the arm length piece is usually involved. It's also like, it's not that delicate. So you can also try something, be like, ooh, that went in the opposite direction that we wanted it to go. Like, let's go back, I think the only thing is if you're like, we're going to chase, we're spending all this time, we're going to give her mobility that she's missing. And we're going to make sure the strength coach is doing that. And maybe it's like, from a health standpoint, maybe that's better, but from a performance standpoint, it's probably not. So that would maybe be the one thing. In pitching, it's usually like we can make a change, see it wasn't good, and go back to it. But if it's like, let's make sure everyone has full mobility of something, that's, most of the time, that's better for pitchers. And there are circumstances where it's not. And that would be an example. It's like a freakish pitch, something they do differently. And like, do we want to give them more mobility? Because that might alter what they do. But it's more likely to give them arm pain. So you have to preserve it. You have to be a little bit. It's kind of what I liked about, one of the things I really liked about Chelsea's talk is like this idea of each year, our goal as coaches is to grow what we know so that we can bring like a more powerful or a more complex system. But then also, you're not just like, and this is what we're going to do this year, because your athletes are like, that's what you think. It's like having kids, like, yeah, that's what you thought this amusement park was going to be like, and so I think it's the same thing. Like, we're trying to elevate our systems, but then they bring to the table what we're like working with, actually. So that's what I took from the talk, and I really like that concept a lot, Chelsea. But I think that's what we're dealing with. It's like, educate yourself on all these things, even if you don't have a particular athlete, because you might at some point, and they'll dictate that.
Any other questions? I think I got through these. Anyone has any more? Yeah.
How do you mindfully talk to your athletes about rest and recovery so that they will be when they don't grow a full 3 days a week? double headers on the weekends that were at the college level and high school.
You repeat it just a little bit.
Sure. The question was like, how do you basically get the buy-in from your athletes to not overthrow? They think that overthrowing is what's going to give them their like performance, and you're trying to say like, no, that's really hard. I think usually it's sort of like, okay, what are you willing to do? I don't really believe in like forcing athletes to like, you have to do it this way. Because then I think like, I don't know, I think there's like more education, like, hey, here's what are you willing to try this? How about we just go down 1 day a week and we just measure? What if you do, we stay with a number of days a week, but on 1 day we come down in volume. So I'm a big one in like, let's just like compromise with them. We also, our athletes are, they come as individuals. So it's like their choice. So if you really give them a plan they don't like, they're going to hit the road. So we're trying to like meet them in the middle. Maybe you have a different way. In college, you're like, I'm the boss, do as I say. But I still think like meet in the middle is best. So I think try to see if like, is it number of days they're willing to compromise on? Is it volume, number of pitches they're willing to compromise on? Is it the intensity that they're like, what are they willing to just try? Treat it like an experiment and then track it. I'm thinking of an athlete a couple years ago where, it's complicated. Like she literally, if she didn't throw 6-7 days a week, I think she was in college, I can't remember, but it was more like a mental health concept, right? Like senior year. Okay, and that's really complicated, and I'm not gonna pretend to be like, and so I just started with that, like, okay, would you be willing? What if we tracked this, and we looked at your date, and we looked at your this, and we went to like 5 days a week, which I thought was too much for her, but it was like her willingness to show like a little bit of a budge. And I think I worked, I don't know if James is you, but I worked with our strength coach at the time of like, if she just doesn't feel like she can rest at all, what are the things maybe, like we just tried every avenue. We eventually got to 4 days, what she was comfortable with because she saw a trend that went up. At the end of the day, she wanted velo. And that it's so tricky to have those conversations. They want velo, but they won't stop throwing. And that's layered. But I think that's what I would do. Just keep like massaging the like conversation of what they're willing to go after. Go ahead, Sat.
So, but a lot that they're getting on a balance board, they're like a beam.
Yeah.
So I have a two-part question.
Okay.
How do I suggest getting them this way
Mm-hmm.
and still be able to not hit their hip and get their hip out of their way? They're used to starting so narrow about the more pitching side and the strength conditioning side. You train them more from a balance beam perspective in their jumping their power position, since that's how they're coming off the mound versus a nice solid straight.
How did you know that was gonna be the first part of my talk tomorrow?
Yeah.
About the stride.
It talks about it.
Yeah.
Should I pass this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm actually going to address this tomorrow morning. Is I think part of the context of our injury landscape right now in pitching. I don't know the answer specifically yet. I don't think we are in that space quite yet. It's a pattern I'm just recognizing. We're just recognizing, but it is a major change, and I don't want to give away the spiciness of what I'm going to say, but it is a major change that I'm not sure we've really fully realized how significant that has been from a biomechanics standpoint. And that is still to come. And there's some other things that have collided with that rule change. And so I'll say, from a biomechanics standpoint, now that we have the data we have from our partners at UNO, we have an agreement now with an Australian company that collects full motion capture and force plates as well. So the fact that we now see the impact of the stride foot, literally quantitatively, is showing some really interesting timing components, not just how much force. So we're very early in that. And I think it is a conversation to be had, because my assumption, and this is a bold assumption, but I think it's an educated assumption, there are diminishing returns in terms of how far back that stride foot should go. And I think pushing it to a point that is, I'm gonna guess, beyond their height or a percentage of their height starts to really complicate some things. And I think it's where we started to see bent arm paths, velos capped, because we've set up that stride foot to do way more than it probably should. And so we've literally, if anyone in our OGX has talked to me in the last 2.5, I'm obsessed with this concept right now because of what we're seeing out of the force plates. And so I say conversation to come. But tomorrow we're going to talk about that rule change. We're going to talk about the collision of a couple things because we need to pay attention to it. And my take home point is, if you have coached for a very long time, if you were a injury-free pitcher in your career, we have to have a different conversation about injuries because of that rule change. And so I think like that's going to be a big conversation for us in the next year. It's a great question.
I think this is so interesting. So also to the youth world, and then I'll give it to James for strength and conditioning. When they changed the rule, and I think this is still the case, different governing bodies have different rules. So if we could not do that, that would be great. So it's like every time you go to a tournament, it's like if it's USSSA, you can step. But if it's ASA, you can't. But if it's PGF, you can't, except for this one, we have the high school rule. And so literally like half the summer I was spending with my pitchers, like switching how they started tournament to tournament. So that makes no sense. So let's make sure we're not doing that. And we were laughing because when the rule changed, USSSA, which is more youth, younger levels, was allowing a step back when the other ones weren't. And so we had younger pitchers who were like, cool, they were like stepping and all crazy. We put the sensors on them and literally it was just like a shaking crazy person during the pitching motion. So it's like sometimes when we're making these rule changes at the youth level, like it's the same thing we're saying, like let's just take it like slow maybe and gather some data before we just do it on what is going to be helpful for them and why we're doing it. And definitely don't have governing body to governing body with different rules for it. That is crazy. So it was just, we were laughing at the time because like we would have 12-year-olds like, no, I can do this. We're like, but just don't. And also like, let's just have the rules be the same across the board.
There is like a rotational piece of like when you get onto one foot where you're rotated over that and that foot is closer to your midline. So just like tissue in your body, you have slings. Don't need to go super deep into that, but being slightly over the midline is fine. But when you have a female pitcher who has the wider hips, forcing them into that tightrope, they're not going to have the stability in the frontal plane, that side to side, to be able to like apply the force off the rubber. So we've played around with some in-house athletes that do have that build that way, and if you give them that slight step out and they have more stability, then they're deciding what they're doing with their body and not just like forced into this that stance where they don't have the stability to produce the force necessary to pitch and control how they want.
Question for you. I'm the question. Do you think that we should get more information from our strength coaches regarding how a pitcher should start on the rubber based on what you know about their stability and their breakdowns in plane? If so, we'll start that next week. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so that's going to come back to like the strength coach's understanding of the pitching motion. So if they don't have that, they can say, you know, you want stability in all three planes and XYZ, but they don't understand the complexity of the pitching motion and what this will mean when you do this. That is kind of tough, which is why this is just something I've been thinking about as we've been sitting here, like inviting your strength coaches like into bullpens, like let them just sit on the side. They write down their questions. You meet with them at a later date. Like the more that your strength coach has an understanding of the sport that they're trying to prepare an athlete physically to play, and like you see that they're driven to do that, that's just going to be better outcomes for your staff.
Yeah, that's interesting thought. Just of like, if you could say like based on, could give this like level of stability and then you mess around with like how wide that base of support needs to be in order to give them the best stability. I think the answer is probably yes. Mm-hmm.
That are the sports psychologists, the pitching coach,
Yeah.
everybody,
Mm-hmm.
the cheerleader. From a strength perspective, are there some basic movements that you either have available or are willing to share that we can implement when we're doing bullpen, outside of bullpen, can't be our practice, we do a full-time job.
Yeah, so this is just another piece that I will be covering in my talk after lunch. I have built in videos, examples, stuff like just general ideas you should be doing in the weight room. So like everybody's comfortable with a back squat or a deadlift or whatever, but we need to be doing stuff in individual sides to like let the athlete learn about their body. So we were talking about their understanding and that adaptable pitcher, like to understand what they're doing if you want to make change, and then just stay healthy. We're playing an incredibly one-sided sport that has a super complex movement. They're using that same arm to throw thousands of times. They're pushing off the rubber with that same leg thousands of times, landing on the other one thousands of times, rotating that finishing through the one way. So if you're not giving them doses, exploring every plane side to side, forward, back, and rotating, and then dividing sides individually, like doing a single arm dumbbell bench press, doing a single arm row, doing lunges, and then doing lunges that travel across different planes. You need to give your athletes that like wide movement base that they can rely on to have the adjustability and like the feel when they go take the rubber.
All right, last one, that's lunchtime. How do you decide between keeping a pitcher healthy by changing a pattern, but that pattern you want to change makes a unique profile?
That's so hard. I don't know if there's like an answer to it. You're like this the whole time. Like, I think you're just like watching. I think you have to ask like, how good is that tool and okay. And I think we can also anticipate like, okay, if we were to change this, and what we always say is the power of consulting is that, like some of the coaches we work with are just incredible. Their sample size is small. They have their athletes. And so the power of us coming in is that like, we just have seen so many cases. And so usually we can talk about what we expect to happen with that pitch if we remove the certain pattern. Like we're probably going to start seeing X. And so we can ask ourselves, like this has come up before, like, okay, this pitch has arm side less sink, but what if we take this away? We're probably gonna have more sink, but no more arm side. Is that fine? Maybe tomorrow's data will help us understand that a little bit more. And so I think is that fine? Maybe it's fine. And so I think we have to kind of see where we are with those things. How good is the tool? How necessary is that athlete? And how severe is the pain? So I think with this athlete here, in a case study earlier, was like, if we just start with workload management and making sure strength and conditioning is on point and making sure all is good, is that enough? And if it's not enough, you don't have a choice, because I don't care how many inches of arm side run she has if she can't lift her arm over her head, or if her elbow is on fire, or, whatever that is. So pain wins the conversation. It's mostly just about one, just because something is unique, it doesn't mean it's like, this is going to win us the national championship because of that 1 inch. So I think we have to assess that. 2, can we take a conservative approach? And if it's not enough, the answer is you can't. And like a lot of things in life, you just can't have it all at once. So you got to choose. So you got to choose health over anything else. But hopefully, honestly, the conservative approach works so many times, I think, because of workload. Because I think right now we're pretty far off in the strength and conditioning, I think as a whole, when it comes to pitchers. Like when James says the sport, I don't even think softball, I think pitchers. It is such a unique demand. It's not just the movement is different, but the demand of it is unlike any other position in any other sport. It doesn't even connect to baseball throwing. And so that's, I think, very important for your strength coaches to understand. So I do think we have a big hole right now, and I think how strength coaches understand pitching. And then I also, as we know, we have workload issues. But I think we are on the right trajectory as a community. I'm saying we, I just think as a community, I feel like we're on a trajectory of understanding like, wait, workload does matter for pitchers. So usually when those are really on point, you can get pretty far. And so hopefully that's the case. But if not, it's not. And you gave it your best shot. And that's life. Hopefully there's teacher and off speed. That's what I would say.
Teacher, when in doubt, teacher and off speed.
When in doubt, throw in the changeup.
We need you to like and subscribe and review the podcast so that we can keep making it every week for you. And maybe even drop what topic you'd like us to talk about or rant about or whatever we do every week.